Well, people, before checking out The Accountant 1, right, we figured, hey, it'd probably be a good job to take a look at the sequel. Well, no, before, yeah, you know what I mean, people. I said that completely the wrong way around, right? Before taking a look at the sequel, we went back to the original film in the series, The Accountant, which dropped in 2016, which, I mean, it's a long motherfucking time ago, right? It kind of feels kind of crazy. This was directed by Gavin O'Connor. It's written by Bill Dubuque. The film is produced by, let us get to that. Dum, 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 dum. Lynette Howe Taylor and Mark Williams. It's executive produced by Jamie Patrikoff, Stephen Munchin, Marty P. Ewing, and Gavin O'Connor. Mark Isham took care of the music. Cinematography is Seamus McGarvey. Richard Pearsons edits the piece. All right, casting was taken care of by Nicole Abarella and Janine McCarthy. Keith P. Cunningham is production design. Art direction, we have John Collins and Stephen D. Freeman. Douglas A. Mowat is set decoration, with Nancy Steiner on costume design. Hair and makeup, we have Lance Aldridge, Kate Biscoe, Vanessa Davis, Bill Johnson, Taylor Knight, Sarah Mays, Tracy L. Miller-Smith, Tracy Moss, Jennifer Santiago, Ada Scoof, Matthew Silver, Christine Wall, Tracy Walker, Brent Conley, Emily Colligan, Ashley Pullins, and Todd Watson. So, the cast of the joint. Well, we have got Ben Affleck as Christian Wolff. There is J.K. Simmons as Ray King. His assistant, Mary Beth Medina, is played by Cynthia Addai-Robinson. There is Braxton, played by John Bethnal. Dana Cummings, played by Anna Kendrick. All right, we've got Francis Silberberg, played by Jeffrey Tambor. There is John Lithgow as Lamar Blackburn. His sister Rita Blackburn is played by Jean Smart. We've got Ed Chilton, played by Andy Umberger. Justine, played by Alison Wright. The neurologist is played by Jason Davis. So Chris's dad was played by Robert C. Trevilla in the flashbacks, right? His mother in the flashbacks is played by Mary Craft. The young Chris is played by Seth Lee. His brother is played by Jake Presley. Oh, the younger version, Justine, is played by Izzy Finnish. Frank Rice, played by Ron Praffer. Delrose Rice is played by Susan Savoy. Don, played by Gary Basaraba. Sulkis, played by Fernando Chen. Simon Dewey, played by Alex Collins. So we've got some thugs, played by Tate Fletcher and Curtis Lyons. Yeah, I mean, that's probably our main group of people. The receptionist at Chris's accounting firm is played by Sheila Maddox. So yeah, I would say that's probably our key peoples, I believe. You know what I mean? So the gist of the film. Christian Wolff is a math savant with more affinity for numbers than people. Behind the cover of a small town CPA office, he works as a freelance accountant for some of the world's most dangerous criminal organizations. With the Treasury Department's Crime Enforcement Division, run by Ray King, starting to close in, Christian takes on a legitimate client, a state-of-the-art robotics company, where an accounting clerk has discovered a discrepancy involving millions of dollars. But as Christian uncooks the books and gets closer to the truth, it is the body count that starts to rise. Dum, 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 dum. Okay, so yeah, there we go. That's the story. And we start off, right? And we're kind of going from that Doom perspective, you know, Doom, the computer game, like third person shooter, I should say that. This probably makes more sense, right? So we are with someone and they're going into a building and there's people getting shot and we hear screaming and just all of this palaver. And as they get closer to the door, right, we kind of think, okay, something's just about to happen. Then we cut and we're kind of, you know, back to current times, right? I think we go to the Treasury Department and we're with Ray and Mary Beth. Well, I think we're with Mary Beth first. And so that's how we kind of get into things, right? Also, we jump to Christian and he's speaking to his helper, right? Which all becomes clear at the end of the film. But yeah, because, you know, everyone's closing in, so he has to take a legitimate client, right? So we have all of this. There's a few different threads going on, which is fine, right? Now, some of the way they get to the gist of the story doesn't, I don't know, it felt like it didn't necessarily make a lot of sense, you know? Because, what can we say? Well, okay. Mary Beth and Ray, right? That whole situation, you kind of think if a question, because like there's no point where a question is asked. And you kind of feel if a question is asked, then there's, you know, the result that was wanted may have just come naturally. Right? It didn't necessarily seem to make any sense for the other stuff to happen. You know? That was a bit, Unless it was, you know, chosen by our, let's say, AI helper. right? But we don't know. But it just was a bit like, that's a weird approach, right? That's odd. Also, I think what we find out later in the film makes you wonder why Ray's even doing this. Because that doesn't become clear. Now, he goes into this backstory, but he doesn't actually go, and this is why I'm, setting out on this search. So those parts of the story are kind of odd, right? I also feel Christian working with all of these criminals isn't really explained, right? Because you're going, is it so he can, I don't know, get paid an exorbitant amount of money, and then that feeds into what we see eventually? Or is he doing, other things, right? Because obviously with the whole AI and Ray, is it feeding into that? It's not really clear, right? None of that is really clear, because if it's just money, surely there are other clients, you know what I mean? And even if it is for the other reason, how did he get on that path? Right? How did he? Because none of that was that clear in all of the backstory and every of the flashbacks and all of that, right? No, it wasn't. As I said, like as the film goes on, we do get these flashbacks to Christian and his brother as a kid with his dad. Firstly with the mum as well, but then for whatever reason that disintegrates. Right, so you don't know, is it because of Christian? Is it because the dad's a dick? Again, don't know. Do not know. Right? There's a lot of ambiguity in a lot of the things that go down in this story. You know what I mean? Which, so a lot of it doesn't really matter. But then there's other aspects where it's just like, right? Surely you're helping the story if you just indicate a thing, you know what I mean? But yeah, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. So we have all of this going down. Now, we understand how Christian is so good at a thing because of the childhood, because of all of that, right? And it's funny because in the flashbacks with his dad, there's certain things his dad says which are legit, right? You're just like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? That's a thing for sure. Because, the world isn't a safe space. So you can't close yourself off to certain realities and things, right? You just have to work out coping mechanisms to deal with that. Now, some of his dad's coping mechanisms, probably not the best, right? Probably not the best way. It is kind of funny with because I think it's a cliche thing, right? It's something that we see, we saw in old films, so people still do it. Like when kids are getting trained and trained in a certain way, like martial and things like that, they get an old dude to do it. When in fact, you could have an older teen, right? Because there's people that start at such an early age that they become killers. I mean, look at Nicky Ryan. I mean, Gordon Ryan, when he first started in the EBIs and everything, I think he was 20, 21. He was super young, you know. And there's a girl that trains with John Danaher. I think the team's First Wave, isn't it? And she is a killer. Oh my God, I forget her name, which is like, it's an irritation because she's so good. But she's like, I think she's, 16 or something like that. And she's a merc, you know what I mean? So you technically don't need an old person doing the training, you know? So, yeah, it is an odd, I think, archetype of, a certain type of storytelling. Now, going Christian with his autism, it makes him super focused, right? Good with detail, all of that kind of thing. Okay. Now, if that is the case, he would recognize walking gaits, right? He would be able to recognize people he knows from, their stature, right? The body, like there's so many things. Yeah, and I said the walking gait because that's very specific. So there is a point where you're just like, right? It's just an odd one. It's an odd one. I was glad they didn't necessarily do a romance thing in the film, although it's heavily inferred that it could happen, which is kind of random because there isn't anything other than, wait, you like numbers, I like numbers, right? That's it. That's it. You're just like, okay, really? The other, like, there is a thing with paintings and art and things like that where, you have someone see something and go, that's an original. Now, I always wonder about that, right? Now, obviously, I wouldn't notice myself because my eyesight is bullshit. But can you honestly, like, if you're not an art expert, right? Can you honestly see something and go, that's what it is? Because, you get very good reproductions, prints, all of that thing. So things could be that, right? Could be that. Now, action wise, it's fun. It's definitely fun on the action. We got a lot of that going on throughout the film, as we see. And O'Connor did direct Warrior in 2011, so there is some fight scenes and there's jiu-jitsu going on. There was a really good guard pass towards the end of the film in a fight. It was a really good guard pass, which I was like, oh fuck, that was, yeah, he got inside real well, but it is a thing where it's just like, I don't know if it's, practical to be doing jiu-jitsu in this environment, right? Because you've got essentially weapons all over the place. Where if you're doing jiu-jitsu in a tournament, training, you're just on the mat, right? So, someone can't grab at something and just stab you or, like, hit your head or something, other things like that. So, although, when you understand what's going on, it's fun to see at times, especially when it's done well, right? But within the story, within the environment they're in, it does seem odd. does seem odd. And I'm not sure grenades would do a thing. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's not a bad. The Accountant isn't a bad film. It does do the thing of, right, we got, they're a high functioning person with a disability, right? But it's very much cherry picking. Like, so that means they can do this and this and this and this and this, right? And this video only shows up in these instances, right? When it's just like, it's not as black and white as that, kid. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily work like that, but all right, we will let you tell your story the way you want to tell it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think if you enjoy, right, a lot of them action films with Dolph Lundgren and all of that, you know, the Stallone ones, the Bruce Willis ones, you know the ones, people, right? The ones that feel like they're direct to DVD types. You know, if they're your if they're your jam, stuff like, I think there was that one, The Best Man, that we looked at a few years ago, and then there's the Scott Adkins ones, right? Was it? Gosh, Double Shot, right? I think we looked at the sequel early last year. I think it's Double Shot again or something like that. But if they're your jam, right, I think you will like The Accountant, you know. But as I said, The Accountant 2 is dropping this week. So I was like, well, I'll cover it for the podcast. Now, The Accountant 1 came out just before we started the podcast. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Let's just let's go take a look, refresh the memory, because I'm sure there's going to be things that they may play on from the first film. So that's what we've done. We've refreshed, and we will go and check out The Accountant 2. But people, those are the thoughts, right? The Accountant.